Hello there, and welcome back. And this time we're continuing our recreation of Frogger. And what we're done today is we're going to add movement to Frogger himself, and then make it so he can't leave the road, can't go back off the screen, as well as goes in the water. He creates a splash and then respawns. So let's get started. So I've moved off all the things that we looked at before, and we've added, let's see, 6 new items because this was already there. So we have a spawn point. The objects we're actually going to add into the room itself is a spawn point and this game controller. We're not going to put anything else in the screen in the game. This obviously can go anywhere, but you want it to be above your block, so the character can't go back off the screen. So for our spawn point, it's going to be just a simple item, a reference point. We're going to make sure it doesn't show up, doesn't have any visibility, as well as just picking the spawn point sprite. The next item we're going to have is a splash. So when the character falls in the water, we're going to create a splash effect. And this is just really, it's a simple animation that is just a circle. I think there's 5 animations, and it's just, oops, make it a little bit larger. So it's just a dissipating of water effect. So it's got 5 frames. And what we're going to do is when we create it, we already know we've gone in the water. So the player object is going to, I believe, is going to create it. So when the animation is done, it's just going to destroy the object and then create the death symbol that shows that we've died. There's nothing else to it. So we're just going to play it, destroy it, and then show the little death symbol. The death symbol itself is just going to last for 2 seconds. So we're going to take the room speed in 2 seconds, and then we're going to create a global state. So I guess we go back over here. We're going to use a plain state within this game. And that way we know we're either starting, dying, a game over, so different game states. That way we can get different things accomplished. So when the death symbol is done, we're going to set it back to a plain state. So this will be just set plain, and then we'll get rid of the death symbol. So I guess we'll go back to the global variables that we had that we're going to be using. One, like I said, is this plain state. We're going to set this debug to true. We probably won't use it. We'll have sound on, music on. I've created a font out of one of the sprites. It uses based on the image. We can actually draw using this as a sprite font. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it or not, but it's available. So what it is just a series of letters and different characters. And then what you can do, as long as they're sequenced, you can create the sequence over here. Instead of, if you want a very customized font, you can create that font using the font add function in a series of sprites. I think in this game, what I wind up doing is going ahead and using the font that's within the game. But we won't really talk about that right now. So then I'm going to create 2 player scores just in case we want to add a second player to make a completely different game. So player 1, player 2, and then which wave this is. And what we're going to do with the waves is make it as if you've played Frogger before, it gets faster and faster, so we're going to have that same effect. The other thing, the next thing we added was a blood sprite. So when, instead of just disappearing, we're going to keep the blood splatter around. So when this blood occurs, we're going to create a death symbol, and then we're going to give it a random look. So we're just going to pick one of 3 different sprites, make sure it doesn't loop through it, and just set to that, and then give it a random angle. That'll give it a little more randomness and not looking all the same all the time. And what we have is these the splash. We're setting the depth to 50, and that'll make sure it's above the water and above the road so you can see it. And then the death symbol itself is going to be a lot higher. We want to make sure that gets seen no matter what occurs, so we're going to set that at the highest. So now we have this game object, and this will be controlling, eventually we'll use this to control the score. So when it gets we enter the room, we're going to go ahead and set the globals, and then I'll set our global variables. We'll step through, and what we're going to do is, if we're in a playing state and the player object doesn't exist, we're going to create it at the spawn point. So that's why we created a spawn point, is to know where that player is going to exist. And we'll do this because when we die, there's not going to be a player, but we'll be in a dying state. And then once that animation is done, we'll bring it back to that correct location. As far as the states go, I've created some variables in this configuration. We have a idle state, a dying. So the game states, I've separated a player state and a game state. So playing, a game over, and a starting. And then we have an idle, a dying, and a hopping, and a safe. We may not use all of them, but adding these variables makes it a little bit easier as far as readability, instead of trying to memorize which number of values exist. Alright, so now we'll go through the player. In the create event, we have some different things. The player ID to identify them for their score. And we're going to set them to idle. That way they're not doing anything necessarily. Move distance will be 16, so that's the size of the squares, the tiles. The move speed will be 4, and that's because we have 4 frames for our animation, and then that way when it plays one time, we're going to wind up moving 4 spots, and then that way it's always going to move 4. So then a move target, that's going to be when we determine where we're going to be next, whether we can actually move there or not. So our current max will be where when we get created, that's where it's going to be, and that way when we get into setting the score, we're only going to add when we're past our current. So as we get higher on the screen, if we come back down and go back up, we're not always adding points, we're just only going to do it as far as we've gotten. So we're going to set the image speed to 0 because we're not going to flip through the frog's animations unless he's moving. The start image is going to start on 0, and then directions going to be 90. That way we're pointing up. So when we do our move steps, we're going to do the down minus up, the right minus left, and then that way we have basically either a 1, 0, or negative 1 value for our movement, and then we're going to determine what to do from there. So if we're going to move, we'll assume we can't move. Actually, we're not doing anything with that, so we'll leave that one alone. Then we have a left, right. I don't think I do anything with that. Oh, I do something with that right now. So we'll look at that in a second here. So if the player's in an idle state, this is what we're going to do. We're going to determine where we're going to be going. So if they're up, these are the different directions. So we're going to change our direction based on that. X, if our X is up or -1, we're going to change the direction of the player. And then we're also going to determine where the player will be. So we're going to say, okay, yeah, X, they're moving to a certain location, and then we're going to tell them that they're going to be hopping. So the move distance is set to 16 because that's how far we would be going. So this would be like a -1, 16, so from basically 16 positions from where we're at. And so this goes in the 4 directions we can move. Then we're going to change the angle based on the direction we've set up here. And that's regardless if we move or not. So it'll be reactive to which button we press. And then the angle is always off by 90 in GameMaker. So the next thing is we're going to determine where we're going to be moving is a blocked. So if it's blocked, we're going to keep our characters idle, so we're not going to be hopping next time. So we're going to override our hopping state. And then just go ahead and set our back to where we're currently at. If where we're at any point, so when we finish hopping, and we get to water, we're gonna make our person splash. So this whole idle is only occurred when we're finished moving or sitting still. So kind of the same thing, but think of it sitting still, or it's exactly right when we've finished moving. So this is what we're going to do. If we're wind up in water, we're going to create the splash, because we don't want the splash to occur like right when we hit the edge of the water. We want it to occur when we're finished our hop. So if we've doing our hop, we're going to look at the direction we're at and go ahead and do the move speed, which is 4. And this is our image index. This is where we're going to, since we're incrementing 1 every step, we're going to only control how many times we're moving through and then set it back to idle. So this is really how we're controlling our hop forward. And this will control it to keep it at 4 frames. There we go. So we've got our moving up and down, our right and left. And if we go off the screen, we'll create the splash just inside. And then if we go to the right, same thing. And then if we go in the water, we splash. So yeah, there's our basic movement within there. Next time what we'll do is add the cars in, so we can actually start avoiding cars, avoiding objects, and trying to get somewhere. So until next time, good luck coding.